Welcome to my barn, outhouse, or whatever you want to call it. You'd have seen this a few times before in the videos, starting almost 2 years ago, would you believe, when I put the new roof on with the help of Keith, and then last year when I added the lights. But unfortunately, I just ran out of time at the end of last summer. So now it's just turned into a dumping ground. So today I'm going to show you how I build a very simple set of workshop shelves, the sort of thing that's really handy in any outhouse, workshop or garage. So I can get all of this rubbish here off the floor and out the way. This is a really useful space to have, especially when you've got a ride-on lawnmower and you've got other lawnmowers and all the paraphernalia and all the junk that comes with dealing with a large garden. But because I haven't got any shelves in here, as I bring things from the main workshop to keep out here, they naturally just go on the floor. And I've got to a point where I literally can't move. If I put any more in here, I won't even be able to take out the lawnmowers. So definitely I need to do this job that should have been done last summer. So I'm thinking of a set of shelves, 8 foot wide, 8 foot tall, the sort of thing that you can store everything from a tent to a can of petrol to an IKEA box and everything in between, to be able to get all of this stuff out the way and raised and tidy and in some sort of order, so I actually know where I can find things. And that will also free me up lots of space in here, so at least I can get the lawnmowers out and bring in sort of the garden equipment. It doesn't have to be treated timber, something cheap and cheerful. It is relatively dry in here, except for the base. So I'm going to have to be a little bit careful of any timber that actually touches the floor, because sometimes when it rains it does get a little bit damp in here. So I'm thinking CLS and I'm thinking OSB, the sort of thing that you build in a garage or an outhouse or a workshop. So the first thing I need to do before I start building the shelves is, unlike a lot of workshops, I've not got a proper wall there. So I'm going to put in a couple of 4x2 3-metre lengths of timber to span between the ground and that beam that I put in with Keith a long time ago. So I can then screw some 3x2 battens horizontally here so I can start my shelving. Now, if you're going to do this in a workshop or a garage, you won't have to do this bit because you probably have a wall, either plasterboard with studs or brick wall to start with. Now, I haven't got that because I've got this corrugated sheeting. So before I build any shelving, I need to do a bit of work to hold it up. Yes, once again, I find myself having to take most of the stuff out of the barn just to earn some room so I can work. I'm terrible for keeping things that may come in useful but never do. So during this process, I promised myself to get a skip sometime during the summer so I can have a proper clear out and get rid of all that stuff that I save but never use. So now at least I can get to the area, and this is the bit I want to get to, this sort of 8-foot span between these two posts. I'm not going to touch this post, which is doing most of the work, and it's all out of plumb anyway. And this one in the corner is a little bit too far back. So I'm going to put a post here, post in the middle, post on the right hand side. And if you look at the top there, I've got that beam that I can actually fix to the back to. And then what I'm thinking is this 3-metre post, the 3 of them, I'll just insert into the ground and put a bit of post mix just to secure them in the ground, one in the middle and one on the left hand side. And I know what you're thinking, yes, I'm going to use post mix, but as I said in all the other videos, I hate the stuff, but there is a time and place. So if I just need a couple of cupfuls of concrete in there that's going to go off fairly quickly so I can work on it, now's the time to be able to use it. Right, so the first thing I need to do is dig a little bit of a hole and see if I can get these timbers lined up, then I can put some post mix in. Just like when I built the front of this barn, I think the easiest way to fix posts at ground level is just to concrete them in, even if it's not that deep. It just stops them moving around in case they get knocked. 150. That's better, I can see now. So what I've got is 3 uprights here that I've just put in. they're actually screwed to the beam at the top, and at the bottom they're actually hanging in a hole, so there's a void underneath them. So hopefully if it ever gets wet, the concrete that I'm about to put in will protect it from the water and stop anything coming up the end grain. I've clamped a beam on here so they're all in a nice straight line, and I've checked the plumb of each one. So we're all ready for my favourite, post mix. Before putting in any post mix, you do need to have plenty of water in the hole, especially if you want to get it to flow underneath the posts like I do here. What you do after that differs depending on who you talk to. However, I've found a mixture of filling, watering, tamping and troweling seems to give you a reasonably well mixed result. So I'm going to leave the post mix half an hour to get some strength. So I might as well carry on with cutting the shelves. And for the shelves, I'm going to be using 11mm thick OSB. Now here's a question for you. How long is a full sheet of OSB? If you said 8 foot, you'd be absolutely correct. This is 3x2 CLS uncut. Now how long is a piece of this? If you said 8 foot, you'd be wrong. It's actually 2.4 meters. So it's 40mm, or 1.5 inches shorter than a sheet of OSB or ply. So if I want the OSB at the same length as the support, I'm going to have to cut 40mm off the end. As it's a nice day, I decided to cut these full sheets outside, which are just easier to manoeuvre. I line them up exactly and clamp them and cut through both of them at the same time, just to speed things up. So I've just got out my second pair of guide rails for my plunge saw. I bought these when I bought the plunge saw so I could cut a full sheet of ply, and this is the first time that I've got them out in anger. And they come with one bar, which means that you can join these together, and I've got another set joined together, but they don't, because they don't come with the second bar, I now can't join this with this. So with a guide rail only long enough to cut 4 foot, I have to resort to using a straight edge from a spare sheet of OSB that I've got, just to make the long 8 foot cut. I still use my short rail, but I'm just sliding it along the straight edge. These sheets I cut exactly in half, which works out to be half of 1220, which is 610mm, minus of course the kerf of the blade, which is 2.6mm, or should I say half of the kerf of the blade, which is 1.3mm, which gives an overall width of 608.7mm, roughly. I've got plenty of strength on my post mix now, so it's time for me to put some battens horizontally to support each shelf, which means I definitely need to decide how many shelves and what centres I'm putting them at. And to help me decide, I made a bit of a story stick here, marking on the shelf positions at 400mm centres, and then on the other side at 500mm centres. Now the 400mm centres, which gives you a clear opening of about 75mm less than that, so yeah, about 325, is big enough to be able to store these IKEA boxes, which I use quite a lot of, but not big enough to store the bigger ones, and I've got plenty of the bigger ones. So I've actually decided to go for the 500, which means I can store the bigger boxes. And when I look around at the things that I want to put on these shelves, like tents and cooler boxes, so I think I'm going to have to go for the bigger spacing. The other thing that determines the spacing of these shelves is how deep they are. I'm going to go for a 24-inch shelf, which means I get 2 shelves out of 1 sheet of ply, which is quite deep, 600mm. Now in a workshop you might decide to go 400mm. That means you can get 3 sheets out of a sheet of ply, 3 shelves out of a sheet of ply. And if you have a less deep shelf, then I think you can have it smaller. The deeper the shelf, you really need it bigger, else you'll never get to the back. Anyway, that's my theory. So I'm going to go for 1/2 metre shelves, and I need to get on with it. I firstly mark where the bottom shelf is going to go, which is quite high because I want an open bottom to store the large items on the ground, so I don't want the shelves going all the way to ground level. I can fix my horizontal rail to my new posts, and then using a couple of spaces I've just cut, I can position the next rail up accurately and do the same. You'll notice I'm using 3x2s for these supports, which will give you more than enough strength for the average homeowner and save on cost. You really don't need to build everything in 4x2, although a lot of YouTube videos coming from a certain country will make you think you do. With the back rails fixed, I clamp the front rails temporarily to them, which gives me the exact same spacing. From here I can build the front frame in this position and use the back rails really as a template. For the uprights, I'm going to be using 4x2 CLS untreated, so I want to protect the bottom of them, the bit that's in contact with the ground. So I use DPM plastic material to wrap them in, just to keep them from sucking up any moisture if the ground gets wet. These 4x2s I can then fix to my front horizontal supports, using the back as a guide, and once done I can lift the whole thing out the way. Just make sure you use the right length screws, because if they're too long you won't be able to. With the frame built, I can cut the other horizontal supports that will go front to back using a stop block so they're all the same length. To fix these to the front and back frames, I pre-drill some toenail fixings which I can use to screw them to the frame. "20 fixings later, I can bring back the front frame and fix them to that, knowing that it's all exactly the same shape and size as the back. The OSB shelves slide in easily from the side and then can be screwed down around the perimeter and onto the intermediate supports. Because of the structure of the barn, I do have to notch out a section on some of them with my jigsaw just to get them to fit. The other thing I found when I was doing this is that the top shelf is so high that if I put the good side of the OSB up, I can see all the printing from below. So for the first time in my DIY career, I put the good side down so I don't have to look at the printing forevermore. So that's the shelves just about finished. Very, very simple, but extremely practical and really going to help me a lot. As I said earlier, you really don't need to use 4x2 everywhere. 3x2 is more than strong enough, and we'll be able to support at least twice as much as the average person will ever load on these sort of shelves. An 11mm OSB is the perfect material for shelves like this. It's a lot lighter than the 18mm and more than strong enough if you've got supports underneath. So there you go, fully loaded up and working, and it's really nice to be able to see what I've got at eye level on shelves rather than it all disappearing on the floor. The only thing I would say is it's full already, so I'm already thinking about where next to build the next set. I hope you've enjoyed this video and it's given you some ideas for some shelving of your own. I will see you next time.